Okay, now for question number 8 from February-March 2019, paper 4, variant 2. Question about functions. Okay, so you have three functions. F of x equals 3 over x plus 2. Here it says x cannot equal minus 2. I'll explain that in a minute. G of x equals 8x minus 5. And h of x equals x squared plus 6. We have three different functions, and all the questions about that follow will be about these functions. Now, what does it mean here, and how does this affect the question? Well, f of x equals 3 over x plus 2, x cannot equal minus 2. That won't affect anything really in your actual steps of doing any of your questions, but a function must always be defined for every single value that is put into it, okay? You'll learn more about this in your later maths life, but basically, if the denominator of this function becomes 0, then it will be undefined. And there's one value of x which will make the denominator 0, which is minus 2. If you put minus 2 instead of x, that will be 3 over 0, which is undefined. So that means this is a function as long as x cannot be minus 2. The rest of them, there's no values of x which will cause them to be undefined. It can take any value of x at all. So therefore there's no condition attached to it. Okay, but that really doesn't affect how you do any of the questions. So it doesn't really matter in terms of, you know, how you approach it. So you can kind of ignore that for now. All right, it doesn't really affect the question. Now it says work out g of 1/4. That means you've got to take the function g, which is this one. So we know that g of x is equal to 8x minus 5, and whatever appears in the bracket must replace the x in our function. So we're going to replace this x with 1/4. So g of 1/4 is equal to 8 times, and you're going to replace the x with 1/4. 8 times 1/4 minus 5. Now, one of the common mistakes that people make when they're multiplying a whole number with a fraction is they multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the number here, the 8. No, this is like 8 over 1 times 1 over 4. So you're multiplying the numerators and you're multiplying the denominator. So the denominator here is a 1 on this 8, okay? But before you multiply, it's always a good idea to cancel out common factors. And you can see you're going to have, that's going to be 2 minus 5. So 8 times 1/4 is 2, minus 5 is negative 3. Okay, part B, work out f(f)(2). Now that means you got to put 2 into the function f, and then you got to put the answer back into the function f again. So first of all, work out what f2 is. f2 is when you replace the 2 here with the x here, sorry, with the 2. So you have 3 over, instead of x plus 2, I'm going to put 2 plus 2, which is 3 over 4. Okay, and now we got to put this value. Okay, so we know that f2 is 3 over 4, so 3 over 4 is f2. So we're going to put 3/4. This is actually the same as f2, all right? Back into the original function, so you have 3 divided by 3 over 4 plus 2, which is 3. You can write it like this if you want. Remember the fraction bar is like a bracket. So 3/4 plus 2 is like 3/4 plus now 2 as a fraction, like this is 2 over 1. You're going to make it into, if you want to make it into an equivalent fraction with 4 as a denominator, it would be 8 over 4. Okay, so you have 3 divided by, that's 3 plus 4, 8 is 11, 11 over 4, which is the same as 3 times 4 over 11, which gives you 12 over 11. So you can write your answer as 12 over 11, or if you want, you can say that's going to be 1 and 1 over 11. Okay, both of them are perfectly acceptable. So that's how you work out a function like this. It's called a composite function, where you find what this part is, f2 is, and then you put it back into the original function. Okay, in the second part C, you got g of x, which I'll write down. G of x is equal to 8x minus 5. Okay, now here you got to algebraically deal with this one. So basically you've got to put the function g of x back into itself. So you got to replace g of x with whatever g of x is. Now g of x, okay, this is basically putting g of x back into itself. Okay, now that's the same thing as taking what g of x is, which is 8x minus 5, and replacing this x with 8x minus 5. So you have 8 times, instead of x, I'm going to write what the function g of x is, which is 8x minus 5, so that takes the place of the x. That's 8x minus 5, so the x is replaced by 8x minus 5, and then you got minus 5 at the end. So 8 times x minus 5. X is now equal to 8x minus 5. So that's going to give you 8, 8, so 64. So you have 64 times x minus 40 and minus the 5 on the outside of the bracket. So 64 minus 40 minus the 5, which is not multiplied by the 8. So that's going to give you 64x minus 45. So that's the answer to part C. Now part D tells us to find the inverse of the function g of x. The inverse of the function g of x. Okay, so to find the inverse of a function, okay, one of the steps you can do is 8x minus 5. Okay, you're basically switching the x and y around when you are finding the inverse of a function. Okay, you're finding the thing that undoes the function. So what you can do is you can say, all right, let's start off by calling g of x y, and you have y equals 8x minus 5. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch around the x and the y. Not change the subject, just write down y as x and write down x as y. Then when I make y the subject of this formula, when I rearrange it to make y the subject after I've switched them around, what would I come out with would be the inverse of the original function. So I have to add 5 to both sides. So I have x plus 5 equals 8y, and then I have to divide both sides by 8. So you end up with y equals x plus 5 over 8. So, oops, x plus 5 over 8. So y equals x plus 5 divided by 8. So that is the inverse function, x plus 5 divided by 8. There's your answer for part D. Okay, the inverse of a function, you basically write it as, instead of g of x or h of x or whatever, you write y equals, and then you just, wherever you see the x, replace it with a y, wherever you see the y, replace it with an x, and then make the y the subject. In so doing, you will have found the inverse of the function. Okay, you can also use flow charts. You can say, okay, what happened you started off with x. What happened to it first? It was multiplied by 8. That gave you 8x. And then what happened to it next? Well, you took away 5 from it. So that gave you 8x minus 5. So when you're doing the inverse, you're going backwards. You're starting from the x on this side, and you're going backwards. So you say the first thing we have to do is add 5 to it. We go backwards and we do the opposite, the inverse operation. So that becomes x plus 5. And then we carry on. We do the opposite of the multiplying, which is the dividing. So you have to divide by 8. So you end up with x plus 5 over 8. Okay, that's not. Okay, now for part E, we've got to find g of x minus f of x as a single fraction in its simplest form. Okay, so we're going to deal with g of x minus f of x. So g of x is 8x minus 5. So you have 8x minus 5. And f of x is 3 over x plus 2. So take away 3 over x plus 2. What we could do here is we could think of this 8x minus 5 as like a whole term together, and you can put that over 1. We're subtracting these two fractions. So what we're going to do is we can make them the same denominator, or you can think about it in terms of multiplying these across. But if you think about it as making them the same denominator, well, we have to make them both over x plus 2. So this is x plus 2, okay, minus something over x plus 2. So on this side, you got 3 over x plus 2. That stays as it is. On this side, to make this denominator become x plus 2, you have to multiply by x plus 2. To multiply this by x plus 2. So therefore, I have to also multiply the numerator by x plus 2. So the whole of the numerator, which is 8x minus 5, must be multiplied by x plus 2. Okay, then we're going to simplify this. Okay, now we can write that as one whole denominator because they're both the same. And then we can expand this bracket. So you have 8x squared, and you got plus 16x, and you got minus 5x, and you got minus 5 times 2, which is minus 10, and then you got your minus 3 from that part. Okay, so if you simplify that numerator, you got 8x squared, and 16x minus 5x is plus 11x, and minus 10 minus 3 is minus 13 over x plus 2. And then we can try to see if this does factorize. It doesn't seem like it does, the numerator. If it can't factorize, then you can't find any common factors to cancel out. Therefore, it's this is simplest form. Now, if you're not sure whether it factorizes or not, you have some doubts, what you can do very quickly is just try to find the solutions to the equation 8x squared plus 11x minus 13 equals 0. And if the answers come out as fractions of exact values, fractions or whole numbers, then that means it can factorize. If it comes out in surd form with square roots, then it means it can't be factorized. So what you can do is just use this little method, go to your calculator and choose the equation part of it, which in this particular equation calculator, it's number 9. And then you see you've got two different types. You've got polynomials and simultaneous. This is a polynomial, so press 2, and it's of degree 2, it's a quadratic, so degree 2. And then you put in the value of the coefficient of x squared as a, which is 8, press equals. Then the coefficient of x, you put it as b, which is 11, positive 11, press equals. And then the coefficient of, or the constant, which is minus 13, negative 13 in that place, press equals. And then when you press equals again, it will tell you the solutions. That's one solution, as you can see, and that's another solution. So you can see that the solutions have got square roots with them. Therefore, that there's no way that that thing could have been factorized. Okay? So that's our simplest form. That's the answer. Nothing can be factorized, nothing can be cancelled out. And there we have it, the answer to part E. Okay, now for question part F part 1. Show that hgx equals 19 simplifies to 16x squared minus 20x plus 3 equals 0. So hgx, so we're going to deal with these two functions here, hgx. We're not worrying about this one in this part of the question. Okay, so now hgx, what does that mean? H of gx, it means you take the function g of x and you replace the x in the function h by it. You substitute the function gx into h of x. So this, okay, h of gx, this 8x minus 5 takes the place of this x in the x squared. So you're going to have, this is going to be 8x minus 5 squared, that's like your x squared, plus 6. Okay, that gives you 8x squared is 64x squared. You're going to have a minus, and you're going to have 2 times 8x times minus 5, which is going to give you, that's 40, 5 8s are 40 times 2 minus 80x, and you're going to have plus 25, because you're going to have that 5 is going to be squared, and plus 6. Okay, so it's the same as doing 8x minus 5 times 8x minus 5. I just use the pattern, square this term, square the last term, and the middle term is 2 times this term times that term. So it'll be minus 80x, not 8, 80x. Okay, I said 80 and I wrote down 8. Be careful. We're making silly mistakes like that. Okay, so that simplifies a bit further. That's become 64x squared minus 80x plus 31. Okay, so we know that that is, it says show that hgx equals 19 simplifies to this. So you're going to have 64x squared minus 80x plus 31 is equal to 19. Now if I subtract both sides, 19 from both sides, 80x, you have 31 minus 19, 31 minus 20 would be 11, so it's going to be plus 12. Okay, 12 plus 19 is 31, that's right. Okay, and that's equal to 0 now because I subtracted 19 from both sides. Now we can see what's common in these two. Well, it's obviously 4 because that gives you 16 there. So if you divide everything by 4, you'll see you're going to get 64 divided by 4 is 16x squared. 80 divided by 4 is 20. And 12 divided by 4 is plus 3 equals 0. So we have shown exactly what they asked us to show. Okay, now part 2 says use the quadratic formula to solve this equation. Show all your working and give your answer correct to 2 decimal places. So it's no good for you to just plug this into your calculator especially the equation function that I've been showing you how to use, okay, for checking. Don't use that for this question at all, okay, unless you want to check your answer at the end. Okay, please make sure you use the quadratic formula, okay, which is as follows. Okay, so the quadratic formula, if you have something in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, the quadratic formula states that x will be minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. Now, all over 2a. Now, this is actually derived from completing the square. Okay, that's how you get this formula, but you don't really need to know that. So a is a coefficient of x squared, which is 16. So a is 16. It's a good idea to write down what everything is here. And b is the coefficient of x, which is minus 20. And c is the constant, which is plus 3. Okay, now writing this formula will not get you the marks. Okay, it's applying this formula. This next step will get you some of the marks for the method. Okay, so putting things in the right place. You've got a minus 20. Be very careful about these signs. Minus 20, plus or minus the square root of b squared. So that's minus 20, including the minus inside the bracket squared. Minus 4 times a, which is 16, times c, which is 3, all over, all of that from the beginning to the end, over 2 times a, which is 2 times 16. Okay, so once you've done that, okay, because it says here show all your working, I would myself not just go straight to the final answer. I would write this in my calculator as it's shown. So, you know, that's going to become minus, which would be plus, so it's 20, plus, I'll write plus, then the square root of, that's going to be 20 squared, okay, that's going to become positive, that's 400, and minus 4 times 16 times 3, then over 2 times 16, okay, which is 32. And that gives me 5 plus root 13 over 8, 5 plus, and you're going to have also a minus root 13 over 8, basically, because you've got to have two answers, over 5 plus or minus root 13 over 8. Okay, now, we have to give our answers correct to 2 decimal places, so what you're going to do here is you're going to press S to D. That's 1 point, so you end up with the answers. Okay, x equals, and you're going to have the two answers, which are 1.07569, 1.075, 1.07569, 569, and it continues on and on. And the other answer is going to be when you put a minus in place. It's like plus or minus. You're going to put a minus, and you're going to go all the way back to just before the sign. Change that plus to a minus, press equals again, and you get 5 minus 4. Of course, that's going to give you 0.174306. 0.174 306, and continues 306, and it continues on. Okay, so we've got to give the answers to 2 decimal places, so that's 1.08 for the first answer and 0.17 for the second answer. Both of them now to 2 decimal places. And there's the end, I think, of this question. Okay, and the next question on the next video. Thank you.